Jon, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Maria, it's an absolute pleasure. I'm living the dream. I know that sounds crazy in this time of difficulty and everything else, but there's so much excitement around. There's so much opportunity around.
I know you're living the dream also because you have just become a grandfather again, haven't you?
Yeah, and people are probably thinking, what? At that young age? Yeah, I have, and I'm absolutely delighted. So there's a slight glow about me today.
And also you're glowing, let's be honest, because your expertise at the moment is more in demand than it's ever been in your lifetime because
Mm.
it's your you're in the sweet spot of everybody what everybody needs, and we'll talk about that throughout this podcast. So I've got lots of questions for you, and of course anybody who's watching on video will see that you look great, and of course they'll hear that you sound great, and we'll talk about some of that too. But before we do that, you've had a bit of a unique and unusual career leading to where we are now. Can you share some of that with us?
I'd be delighted to, and yes, it is unique and unusual. And that's exactly what my parents have said about it several times. I started by training to be a surveyor, normal, everyday job, and I got a little bit bored because I quite like excitement. So I became a DJ in Europe, which is, again, slightly hard to believe now. My kids struggle to believe it, but I did. I enjoyed doing that in nightclubs across Europe. Then I came back and ran some nightclubs in the UK, some big ones, some small ones. Got a lot of experience of management there, of leading people at difficult times. And then fell into commercial radio. Always wanted to be in radio. There's a long story, a guy called Dave Christian at Radio Luxembourg, who really got me into broadcasting because I went into a studio and watched him work. I thought, I want that job. And so I managed to get a job in commercial radio, doing Yes, Indeedy, Here's Another Tune, because that was the way it was done at the time. And then I was sort of headhunted to move to the BBC. And I spent 16 years on and off with the BBC, both on radio and on television, because then television came into it, and then did television work for lots of companies all over the country and abroad, and really had a fantastic time. Halfway through that, though, someone said, Jon, look, you are used to working with audiences, because, of course, as well as the radio and TV, I love appearing in front of audiences and helping audiences to really connect. And so they said, will you help us to understand how this media thing works? And more importantly, will you help us to understand how you can connect through a little bit of plastic and metal, which is a camera? And so that's how my coaching career started as well. And that led to speaking about it and just generally helping people to really understand how this technical stuff works in really simple ways.
Fantastic. And actually, and leads on to what you're doing now, because now you're helping leaders to not only connect, but really engage with their audiences using visual technology, which is so important because engagement's been a problem for all the time now, hasn't it? It was a problem before we went into lockdown and we're all, all this pandemic and working from home and working remotely. And I can see that we're going to be disrupted and not be back in our offices for quite some time. But you see this as an opportunity to actually grow engagement and increase engagement. Tell me a little bit more about that, the thinking behind that.
Well, it's straightforward. There's a lovely expression, Maria, which you've probably come across too, which is if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And a lot of leadership communication has slipped into that pattern. And they're still doing things in the same way they've always done it and hoping, what was that, the definition of madness, that they're going to get a different outcome. I'll give you a couple of examples. Overuse of PowerPoint, meetings on a fixed time schedule. So how long's a meeting last? Basically an hour. That's because Outlook says so. Not because the content's worthwhile or not because the outcome's worthwhile. So there's a chance to really shake that up. Add on top of that the layer of now not being able to physically see people and read people. We all have that ability to read audiences. We don't practice it enough, but we actually can read people. We do it naturally as part of our psychology of understanding other people and how they feel about it, whether they're upset or excited or whatever. In fact, let me share a story from radio. My ability to connect to someone had to get up quickly, because I would meet them. If you've ever been in a radio studio, they would walk in the radio studio. I would try and get up and shake hands and say good morning just to make physical contact and then sit down. And I probably had 10, 12 seconds to do that while something else was going on. And then we were into the interview. In that 12 seconds, I had to suss out, are they angry? Are they upset? Are they nervous? Whatever, to be able to work well with them to make that connection from a listener's, and then in the television world, a viewer's point of view. But isn't that the same for leaders, especially on Zooms? How many boring Zoom calls have been on where someone thinks it's just information exchange and we go, ooh. Or worse still, we have a button, which we can't do in meetings that well, we turn them off, or we do something else, or we go and make a cup of tea, you know? So the world now, as you rightly say, is changing into this online world. And I think leaders can make a huge deal of difference. And some of the stuff I talk about is how to connect with an audience when you can't see them, when you've always been used to seeing them. When you can't actually see people in a room around you, or a town hall, or a conference, how do you work that bit to be better? Because we really know what they're thinking, what they're doing. It's just how to get into that process of doing it. And that's the exciting bit. That's the bit that anyone can do. And it's just a question of them really getting on top of it and practicing a few skills.
But actually, it's further than that, though, because we were talking about this before we came onto this. You were saying the fact that now leaders can connect and engage with people from other countries, other time zones, whenever they want to, if they harness this visual technology, which probably they hadn't thought of, because everybody now is using it. Whereas before, you'd have to wait more or less for the annual conference to talk to your people, but now you can do it much more. So I think it raises huge, exciting opportunities. But let's get into some of the nitty-gritty of this, though, because to get it right, I mean, as a leader, you've got to come across as credible. You've got to come across as professional. So you help leaders, and in fact, anybody who needs to come across and connect and be engaging. It's not necessarily just leaders, but so they've got to get the tech right, and they've got to get the communication right. So let's start with the tech, because from the tech point of view, let's be honest, not all of us know what we're doing. I mean, my nickname is all the gear, no idea. I have got all the gear and no idea. What I love about you and working with you is that you've helped me. I'm a little bit more techie than most, but actually I'm not really. I pretend. I'm good at pretending. And you help me through it. So you can help leaders, because I think most leaders are not very tech minded, are they? Would you say?
I don't think they need to be, really. There's two sides to this. There's the actual technical side and the emotional and psychological side. Let's talk about the technical side. Simply, the impression you make when you first appear is the same impression you'd make as to walking into a room of strangers or walking to a board meeting or whatever. Yeah, and people straight away think, oh, what are they like? Before you even say a word, in milliseconds, they're making an impression. And that first impression for leaders is vital. But what are we seeing in this online world? We're seeing people whose camera isn't very good, whose microphone, you hear them sometimes, but not all the time. Their lighting, I call it nostrils, ceilings, witness protection, because we've seen lots of those, haven't we? We've seen lots of ceilings where the camera is kind of somewhere above them. We see their nostrils because they're leaning over the computer or their laptop. Or the witness protection shot, which is when the lighting is all behind them and all we can see is a blur. It doesn't do them any favors whatsoever. And that's easy to change. A decent camera, and I'm not saying, because it can be done on any budget, and this is crazy, isn't it? From your own phone, set up in the right way with the right lighting, and maybe with a microphone that goes into it to make it a bit sound on the basic, to if you want to make a really good impression, you set up with a decent mini studio that makes you look $1 million. Yeah, doesn't cost $1 million to achieve, I promise you that. But actually gives that first impression, which is so strong. It looks good. Like your lighting, Maria, great. The background, great. The sound, great. And I know, because we've talked about it, you've invested in a really decent camera that can do all sorts of other stuff with communication for you. It can be easily achieved, but don't be afraid of the tech. The tech is just the process to get there.
Well, you see, I've been thinking about investing in I'm using my normal webcam here, but I have created a little mini studio upstairs with your advice and help. And I've been wanting to do it for ages, and I haven't done it because the tech scared me to death. And you just took me by the hand and walked me through it. And I know that actually you also offer, for if people want to, you will go and set up a home studio for them on their budget, which is just, I mean, what a wonderful service to have. But I would not have upgraded to an all singing, all dancing camera, which is wonderful because I can move around and it automatically focuses on me and it all looks great and I can do all sorts of crazy things. It's just that. So thank you so much. I'm so grateful. So watch out, world. There's a lot of stuff coming from me. So, but if we're talking about these things though, with regards to, lighting and sound and what's the most important thing? If you're folks starting one thing at a time, if you're breaking it down, what's most important?
Well, there's two things. Sorry if I can say that, because
Okay,
they're both linked. Okay, thank you. One is the picture, the other is the sound. Both are crucial. Yeah, the lighting you can get away with, but if they can't hear you, you're not going to make the impression you want. If you want to, as a leader, make a really good impression, they have to hear what you're saying. It's not kind of a muffled or whatever and a strange, slightly weird sound. Any distraction that gets in the way, and maybe if we get time, we'll talk about backgrounds and backdrops, but any distraction gets in the way. The first distraction, if you can't hear them, you turn off. Give you an example. If you're listening to a radio station in the car, in those days when we used to travel to meetings, and it kind of keeps fading and going, you'll swap very quickly. We do the same. So if we're watching someone on a video, we might be able to see their mouth working, but if we can't hear what they say, forget it. We will tune out. Equally, the other balance, if we can't really see them, we struggle. Human beings need facial recognition contact to be able to make that connection. And if we can't see them, one of the things you just mentioned then, a lot of the lower end cameras find it really hard to focus. So if you move back and forth, even a little bit, it'll go whoo, and it'll disappear, and then you'll come back in. Now, by upgrading, you kind of lose that straight away. And by having the right lighting, you can help that stop straight away. So the two things, how do you look? How do you sound? Crucial. And again, if we go back to the world of conferences and speaking, which is our world, if you walk onto a stage and they can't hear you, forget it. It's embarrassing. I've walked onto a stage in front of 50,000 people and they forgot to turn the microphone on, but they did turn the screens on. And that was really embarrassing. I don't want to go there again. But I want to help people do that. And your question was, which are the two most important things? Getting the picture right, getting the sound right. Everything else, you build around that.
So, Jon, I want to pick up on the topic of virtual backgrounds because I've seen all sorts of crazy and amazing things go on. I personally quite like them, but only if you've got a green screen. Is that the secret, would you say?
I think the secret, to your point, Marie, is no distractions. What's the most important point? You're the most important thing on that call, not behind you, because I guarantee that we have looked at people's backgrounds and started drifting onto, oh, what books are they reading lately? Or what's that strange object up there? Oh my goodness, where are they broadcasting from? And when I'm talking to audiences, I use a picture of a real life situation where an American ambassador, I think it was to one of the Eastern European countries, was broadcasting from this hotel room with an unmade bed, clothes scattered, bedside cabinet, I don't know what she was. And you think, that was what I looked at. I wasn't listening to what they said or what they were talking about. I was distracted easily. So distractions are key. Now, when it comes to setting up your studio and how you want to look, what's the impression you want to make? It's the kind of same with clothing, and we talk a lot about clothing and what to wear, what not to wear, how to make that impression. So, for instance, going a slight tangent, if you roll out of bed in your PJs, you would never walk into an important meeting like that. But people are doing at the moment. That kind of, we want to change that. However, backgrounds. This is a background. It's a little pop-up black studio background. Yeah, it's not very big, but it works. I've created the lighting around it to create this impression. So this is what we do. We talk to each other through that. You've got a lovely non-distracting background. I know in your studio, green screen, whatever, so you can put whatever you want. I better explain green screen because green screen scares people sometimes. Green screen is chroma key. Basically, it's just a plain color, which is a strange shade of green. There's lots of different ones, but a green, that the camera can then, through technology, lose, and you can put a different background on it. Now, most people will have come across that in Zoom, where it's done purely electronically. To lesser and great degrees, I'm afraid that I'm not a great fan of the Zoom backgrounds. Firstly, because you can tell, because if they put their hand up, suddenly there's a webbing around their hand, and you can tell they're not in a real room. First, you think, oh, wow, is that where they live? And then you realize when they move a little bit, it's not, because part of their face moves, or maybe their glasses, part of it, the reflection changes it. So if you want a decent green screen, I can teach you how to put the green screen up so you light it beautifully, so the edges are crisp, so you look right. So for instance, if you're a leader in an engineering world, we have a fantastic backdrop of an engineering company. So people look at the backdrop, they, oh, that's what they do. And then they come back to us. Mm. So that's if that makes sense, the non-distraction bit.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. Brilliant. Okay, that's fantastic. So, and what's interesting also, you talk about the emotional side, the present side, the human side of it too, not just the techie side. Now, you describe yourself, and no one's going to believe this, as a shy person in a noisy body. I mean, you come across incredibly confident. There's definitely no shyness there, but yet you say you're shy. How do you do that? How do you come online confident?
I am shy, and people never, ever think I am, but I am. Give me 50,000 people on a microphone, I'm actually a happy bunny. That's weird for a shy person to walk on and do that. What have I done? I've learned how to do it. All through school and everything else, I was learning how to control what's going on in there to make me feel good in any situation. So the way I do it, I approach it in a slightly different direction. I approach it proactively rather than reactively. You know, we react and go into rooms full of strangers and we think, what are they going to think about me? And all the what ifs kick in. Now, it's whether or not we allow those what ifs to take over, or whether we say, actually, no, I'm going to control this. I want to be here. So we make it a positive, proactive thing. And it's the same with cameras, right? People go back, and when people are growing up with cameras, and I'm sure you've seen people when someone's come with their home camera or video as it used to be, or telephones it is now, and, oh no, take that away from me. Well, the psychology of that is your brain is saying, oh, danger, danger, I don't like that because it's unusual, right? Take that one pace forward. We are asking now leaders to go on camera and relate to a camera and be totally comfortable with a camera. It's a learned skill. It will not just happen instantly. We're used to talking to people, so we can look at people's faces and we can relate, and that's not a major problem. If it's a stranger, we still have a little way to go to get really comfortable with it. But suddenly we've got an inanimate object in front of us. We're having to talk to that inanimate object and really connect through it. Now, I'm very fortunate. My background, as you said earlier, is television. Now, in television, you speak to inanimate objects for a living. You actually have a conversation with this inanimate object and you relate to it. And even if you can't see the audience, you're still relating as a human being to the camera. That's a skill. It's a learnt skill. Anyone can do it, but they have to take the time and practice doing it and get comfortable. And your question was, how can I be comfortable? I'm comfortable walking to any room in the world now. Was it always the case? No. Just learnt those skills to think, right, let's put it in a different place in my head. Let's put appearing in front of a camera in a different place in my head and want to be there. And anything we want to do, we do because we like doing it. Rather than see it as a chore and a danger, convert it to actually something that could really help us. And you talked earlier about opportunity. The opportunities have never been greater for leaders to relate through a lens, connect through a lens, as they would if they were talking directly to one of their team or one of their employees halfway around the world. Because that's what the best leaders do. And this is the opportunity now, I think.
And do you know what, those skills of being able to, obviously on radio you were doing it just through the voice, you didn't have an audience there. That's even harder. Through television, okay, people can see you, so it's probably a bit easier, as you say. So those skills that you've learned are so applicable now. And we've been talking about leaders, but actually I've seen speakers, it's fascinating, I've seen speakers who are brilliant on stage, put a camera in front of them and it's like they just freeze and they're not them anymore. And then I've seen the other way around, where people who are not confident on stage talking to a camera, they're quite comfortable because there's nobody there. Personally, I prefer to talk to a camera because if I see people that they're not really sort of paying attention or they're not, I get very nervous. Whereas if I don't know if anybody's watching, it's okay. Do you know what I mean? So anyway, listen, Jon, I could talk to you forever. There's so much value that you can bring in this new world. What would you like to leave us with? What thought would you like to leave us with regards to this visual technology?
I think, and it's a great question, Maria. What would I like to leave you with? I would like you to think differently about it. I would like to convert it to something that will give you the positive opportunity. Now, whoever, whether it's speakers, leaders, whatever, we want in this new world to make the best impression we can, because everything relies on that. We're not going to get away with it. The kind of amateurish, oh, we've all in this together, we're all done Zooms, it doesn't really matter, I think is going to matter more and more. So convert it to professionalism, what I would say. Be professional in it. I mean that in the nicest way, not the aloof type of professionalism. Be human, be warm, connect through a lens, take the steps to be the person you want to be, which you are inside, but allow that to come out, because that's going to pay dividends for you time and time again.
Oh, brilliant. Love that. Thank you, Jon.